Well, hey there, buzzards. Today we're going to show you just how easy it is to order from us in multiple different ways. Then you too can be carefree and laughing near a book like this Wish.com version of Gianni and Donatella Versace. Are you ready? Let's get to it. The first method is to simply call us at 206-436-2960 during business hours. We'll be happy to either search the stacks for a used copy or help you order a new one. This is a very direct option, and we love hunting for stuff. If your phone actually looks like this, we may not be able to help you, as we do not currently accept orders from mid-century Germany. The second method is to use our simple online order form found at koothbuzzard.com/order-online. Just enter your information into the form and someone will contact you as soon as possible. Much like this penny farthing, it is rudimentary but effective, and probably not doing you any favors with potential suitors. Well, humbug. Who needs a suitor when you can get a tutor? We're still workshopping that joke. Using those two previous methods, all profits go directly to Kooth Buzzard. But we know you like to support other businesses who are helping indie bookstores get a leg up on big box stores and corporations. And that's where Bookshop and Libro come in. We make a percentage from sales that take place on those sites. On our Bookshop storefront, clicking on a title takes you to its page, where you can learn more details, see reviews, and read more about the author. Some books are even available as ebooks that you can read on one of those newfangled devices, you trendy little fop you. And with Libro, you can cut the Audible cord and enjoy DRM-free audiobooks and bookseller-curated recommendations. Listen in the car, sneakily at your desk, or while binging police procedurals and having candy for breakfast in bed at 3 p.m. because you're an adult in a pandemic and nothing matters. And of course, there's always that evergreen option of coming in, saying hey, getting a cookie and something to drink, and chatting it up with all the people you run into at your local version of Cheers, the Kooth Buzzard. So pardon me, just 1 second. Oops.
Thank you. Mark told me he intends to sleep over, so be here for the gig.
He's here for the duration.
You know, I was worried about the heat and playing in the heat, and it made me think of some, maybe you both have some experiences with that. First of all, I learned when I would get on stage and my hands would sweat and I would stick to the guitar. So this old musician told me to carry a bit of cornstarch, so I use that from time to time, and that's really saved my life quite a bit. But I do remember one time that I was with the Gorilla Band. The Gorilla Band was a very fun band, old jazz tunes, and we often opened for another bunch of friends of ours from Magpie in Washington, D.C. So we played some bar in rural Maryland, and the air conditioning was on. It was a hot night. Air conditioning was on, so it was just freaking cold inside. And I had a metal guitar in those days. And the guerrilla band decided somehow backstage that we were going to come out topless. And we had a bunch of things we were going to say and play. Well, I forgot that you leave a metal guitar in an air-conditioned room. I slapped that sucker against my chest and I could not breathe for about a minute. So.
And then they had to take you to the hospital to defrost it.
So that was a learned
Take him to the
experience.
ER and put a hairdryer to it.
Dentist sure made faces, raise another pig. The poor kid's got to have braces, we'll raise another pig. This grocery bag is lighter than air. I bought the bus or the raised fare. Great big holes in my underwear. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. This is your part. Raise another pig. Raise another pig. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. The new car's broke and we'll take it back. Raise another pig. Put the pieces in a sack. Raise another pig. It's 1 month old and guaranteed. More good parts on a centipede. More damn fun than a pig feed. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Raise another pig. Raise another pig. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Drum solo. Went to pay my mortgage. Raise another pig. The bank said there's a shortage. Raise another pig. I sold the kids and I sold the car. I kept the dog and the old guitar. The wife ran off, but she can't get far. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Raise another pig. Raise another pig. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. When it comes to health care, raise another pig. Might as well not be here. Raise another pig. The doctor said it's just your heart. We get off one pig and get the part.
Oh, really?
Bring the pig in the shopping cart. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Raise another pig. Raise another pig. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Raise another pig. Raise another pig. We can almost make it to Wednesday if we raise another pig. Thank you for your participation. All right. So this next song is about Mars.
Give me about 2 seconds here to get my Martian harmonica.
All right. So the
Change the
Mars is almost always in the news. You know, they have a rover going around up there. This is written about the first Mars rover that actually, I think it lasted about 15 years. It was only supposed to last like half a year. And they kept it going, and once it died, and then they were able to bring it back. But then it finally died because it was just covered in too much dust and couldn't charge its batteries. And there was a journalist down in California, Jacob Margolis, who writes a lot right now about California wildfires. Very good journalist, but he penned some words for this rover when it was dying out, and basically said it's growing dark, my batteries are getting low. So other people use that, and I
It's
eventually.
poetic because what the thing was actually sending was a stream of ones and zeros indicating
Exactly.
what the light level was
Exactly.
and what the battery level was.
And there
Not
were
so poetic.
people like me that thought, oh, it's really translated into that.
You know, it's kind of like that thing about the guy who believes that the AI has become sentient. You know,
Yeah, right.
if somebody else wrote, you could write, "Please don't burn me, I'm sentient," on a piece of paper, and some people would believe it.
And you know, up there on Mars, they've done a number of studies. That the first rover was basically testing for water and rocks and stuff, but they've been looking for life on Mars forever.
Plants and birds and rocks.
But they haven't found any of that substance that is in every living thing down here on Earth.
Plastic?
No, I'm talking about high fructose corn syrup. I'm a rover on Mars, dodging potholes and boulders, roaming craters and hills and testing rocks for the presence of water. But the atmosphere's bad and the temperature's cold, and there's no place to hide my weary frame on this perilous road. It's growing dark, my wheels won't roll, mired in the dust, and my battery low. Can't raise my arm, can't read my dial, buried by the storm at the 28th mile. There's a face on the moon, staring out through the stars. As for me, I am just one tiny speck on the surface of Mars. Like those faces of stone, looking out through the night, as an asteroid passed and waved goodbye on a perilous flight. It's growing dark, my wheels won't roll, mired in the dust, and my battery is low. Can't raise my arm, can't read my dial, buried by the storm at the 28th mile. They could send a command, well, I cannot respond, 'cause the dust storm must cover all my shields while my power is gone. If I just had a heart, if I had half a brain, sending photographs through space of this hostile terrain. It's growing dark, my wheels won't roll, mired in the dust, and my battery is low. Flagstaff, farewell, I rest this while. You will find me here at the 28th mile. It's growing dark, my wheels won't roll, mired in the dust, and my battery is low. Flagstaff, farewell, I rest this while. You will find me Another thing about Mars, that recently they said they had discovered 3 hidden lakes on Mars. And that prompts that age-old Mars question, namely, who hid those lakes and why? I went down in the woods the other night, looking for a possum with my flashlight. Shined a light upon his knees, but a 6-foot possum seemed quite extreme. It was a big bear. I climbed a sapling. It was a tall bear. I climbed a fir tree. It was an angry bear. So I sprouted wings and I couldn't come down till morning. Armed to the teeth with a gun and a knife. Ready for a bear, and I heard a thump, got ready to aim, but it was a skunk. It was the wrong end. I had to sleep outside. He was a good shot, I had to burn my clothes. It was a frightened skunk with an awful smell that lingered on all summer long. On you. Daylight and yelled for that bear, come out and fight. Slowly crept out through the trees. I heard a noise. It was a swarm of bees. It was a big swarm. I started running.
Just give bees
Like 1,000 needles, I kept on running. I did a swan dive into the pond. I got all knives. I stopped the landing. So I'm down in the fish pond covered with mud. I yell for help and I hear a thud. Then came a scroing and crash and a boom, and a beaver dropped a tree in his front room. It was a big tree. Busy beaver split that pond just like a cleaver. And when that tidal wave washed over me, something in that pond tasted nasty. Don't go down in the woods neither day nor night. The critters there will pick a fight. Big sharp teeth ready to bite. To be looking left when you should look right. Something sneaky like a bad dream. Frogs with big eyes, coyotes on steroids. Rabbits with gang tactics, weasels with long spiky tails, snakes with rummy stomachs. And you won't be coming home anytime soon. You might die. Have to miss some school. You'll need a good excuse, so write this down. It was a big bear. I climbed a sapling. It was a tall bear. I climbed a fir tree. It was an angry bear. And I sprouted wings and I couldn't come down till morning. I'm going to turn this over to my cohort here.
This is where I get to come out from behind the sidekick role, a little bit at least. I'm actually still hiding because I have a very large instrument to hide behind. You have no idea how comforting that can be sometimes, even in a teeny tiny room, because I don't know who's over there. I don't know who's watching. Could be 1,000 people watching this stream, and I don't know it. Could make a guy nervous. Yeah, don't all tip at once. Okay. The thing is,
do you ever remember seeing the comedian Charlie Quanti, I think it was? He was a drummer, and he would he'd be like on Johnny Carson, and he'd be behind the cymbals, but he'd peek out, and he had this rubber face that just would crack up the audience. And they kept trying to throw him off the show. They wouldn't let him on because he would always do that in the middle of somebody's set.
Never heard of him.
Disabled. But he was a good drummer.
I
Everybody in
think I
Johnny's
was
band.
last.
Everybody in Johnny's band was like, they were just aces. They could play anything the first time.
Yep.
Rats. The thing about the guitarron, this is a guitarron. Guitarron, no, it's audience guitarron. It's of course, a Mexican. It's at least nominally in our understanding, at least a Mexican instrument. It comes from Europe. It's first described in Don Quixote.
Wow.
That's how far back it goes. It's a cousin rather than a descendant of the guitar. It descended. They both descended from an earlier common ancestor. But you see the thing, and I don't know why these are not more popular, and I think it has to do with cognitive dissonance. Because when you see one of these things, what you see makes you think that the person playing it should be, wearing a brocaded uniform, a great big sombrero with little dealy balls around it to chase the flies away, and a big mustachio, and maybe, shiny black boots with a tasteful heel, and perhaps a paunch to hold the instrument away from his belly a little bit, or from his chest a little bit. But when you hear me start to play, what you hear is something makes people think that I should be wearing a beret, shades, little goatee, maybe, soul patch. And I should be playing in a coffee house somewhere, some low-down bookstore or something, with a bunch of customers, properly dressed, of course, sitting at wire spool tables, with maybe a wine bottle candle holders back, and a lot of wax on them, and they're appreciatively snapping along. You take your keys for it. There's a stranger before you, right in front of your eyes. I pass amongst you unnoticed. You might clever human being in disguise. Don't look me over too closely. You might just get a surprise. You wouldn't like what you'd see behind my clever human being in disguise. I only hope that you appreciate the pains I take to please, and not inflict too much ugly truth on your trembling sensibilities. So sleep the sleep of the righteous, and dream of comfortable lies, and just ignore me as I creep by in my clever human being disguise. If you should get too inquisitive, be careful, you could be wrong. Get a fleeting glimpse of yourself wearing a mask of your own. Don't be too quick to dismiss me, to disparage, disdain, or despise. 'Cause I'm not the only one walking around in a clever human being disguise. In a clever human being disguise. In a clever human being disguise.
These are things. Yeah. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, that was that one. It's the only one I think that I do without a
Whenever
harmonica
I
rack.
hear the beatnik theme anywhere, I started playing music in 1962, 61, 62 in Tacoma and in the coffee houses. And out in South Tacoma Way, we had a coffee house called The End. It was run by some guys from Fort Lewis.
This is the end.
And they would have jazz groups there, but then they'd have a little folky guy like me. And now The End had this beatnik theme to a T. They had the Banana Divided, which was a banana split, and they had a Coexistence, another ice cream dish where you had ice cream at 3 or 4 different levels. And there was a sign above where the bathrooms were. It said the rear end. So, and I was there one night. It was just smoky as all get out, and I played a little classical guitar then. I could not tune my guitar on the stage. It was embarrassing. Couldn't tune it. I got off the stage and wandered into the kitchen, and the guy in there with a baseball cap and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, he's cooking the fries. He could see what I was doing. He said, "Give me that." So I gave him my guitar. He tuned up my guitar, and I went back out. He's like fry cook back there. In The End in Tacoma, that's kind of my experience.
Give me that. There you go.
Yeah, I don't know who that guy was. I never looked back.
Well, he worked as a fry cook. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And he tuned your guitar.
And he got better
Tuned
money.
my guitar.
And he, yeah, no matter how well he tuned your guitar, his job was a fry cook.
The strings were nicely lubricated afterwards too.
Right. Yeah. This is an old tune. After you've gone, left me crying. After you've gone, there's no denying. Feel blue, you feel sad. You miss the dearest pal you've ever had. There'll come a time, now don't forget it. There'll come a time when you'll regret it. Someday soon when you grow lonely, your heart will break like mine. You want me only after you've gone and left me, after you've gone away, after I've gone, after we break up, after I've gone, you're gonna wake up, you'll find you were blind to let someone come and change your mind. All of the years we spent together, joy and the tears, all kinds of weather. Someday soon when you grow lonely, you'll long to be with me again, back where you started, after you've gone and left, after you've gone away. Someday soon when you grow lonely, you'll long to be with me again, back where you started after you've gone and left me, after you've gone away. I think I did that a little kind of a weird group. You're up again, sir. You got
No,
Oh, yeah, all right.
Get that steel and that electric going.
So you know, back in the 80s, 1981 to be exact, I was singing with Three Damp Duck, a little band from Vashon Island, Mary Litchfield Toole and Rick Toole and myself. And 1 year to the day that the Issaquah ferry was put in the water, it smacked into the Fauntleroy dock and put itself out of commission, and people had to drive downtown Seattle, and so up till then I had, when I did solo shows, I would sing a version of the Greenland whale fishery song, an old whaling song, and I would sing it a cappella, and so I was really versed in that. But when the Issaquah ran into the Fauntleroy dock, we drafted this version of it real quick.
You're not doing a song that's on the list.
I'm just gonna throw it in.
What key is it in?
It's in, I think it's in E. It's real fast. I'm just trying to give some credence to my history here. So.
Go for it, kid.
Actually, I used to do this in G, and it killed me the last time I tried to do it in G, so I'm going to try to do it in E. The Washington ferry system ordered work begun. Give us a boat that at least will float. Gigantic cost overruns, gigantic cost overruns. So someone threw the Issaquah on a napkin in a bar and sold the plans to an enterprising man who built it in the dark, But first was this, and then was that, and the whole thing seemed insane. And when they ran the boat aground, computers got the blame, computers got the blame. It was almost 1981, and trouble was ahoy. The boat had pulled out from Vashon, bound for Fauntleroy and bound for Fauntleroy. Now the dock was set when the boat arrived to receive her like a buoy. But the boat came in full speed ahead and crushed in Fauntleroy and crushed in Fauntleroy. The Issaquah is a dreadful boat, although it is always clean. But it's in the shop 3 times a week, and seldom ever seen, and seldom ever seen. Just trying to prove that I had some pedigree in fairy songs. So this is one we call Steel Electric, and we take the Everett Herald. We're up in Stanwood, and came home one night, and there was an article in the paper that said hammer put a hole in the Hayu's hull. So the Steel Electrics were these steel ferries that were running around the Sound forever until their rust got to them, and the Hayu was the one where the hammer went right through the hull, and they pulled all the Steel Electrics off at that point, and I guess they went with composite and whatever. So this is sort of a requiem for the Steel Electrics. Started in the year of 51, the system in Washington. Mosquito fleet from the black ball line, built of wood and good design, but wood can rot and wood can wear. Soon these halls would need repair, need repair, need repair. Soon these halls would need repair. That final verse always repeats stuff, so if you want to join in, that's fine. And the other halls were made of steel, from the captain's post down to the keel. The high and click-a-tap. Even stranger names than that. Steel is strong, steel is good. Soon the steel replaced the wood, replaced the wood, replaced the wood. Soon the steel replaced the wood. 81 years on the Puget Sound, the steel electric sailed around, trusted on the Keystone Run. We all thought they'd carry on, fighting wind and courting waves. Steel can slowly rust away, rust away, rust away. Steel can slowly rust away. 41 years on the Puget Sound, the tiny Haiute sailed around. Men like me, we turned her wheel. We trusted God, we trusted steel, and we heard that awful sound. The shipwright brought his hammer down, hammer down, hammer down. Shipwright brought his hammer down. Steel electric old lang syne, highway through the Maritime. The hammer tore a hole in one. The steel had rusted down to none. The hammers twas struck and it betrayed. Steel electric cast away, cast away, cast away. Steel electric cast away. And some newer boats were built askew, from stem to stern, from wheel to screw. And some would lift, and some were slow, and some required a lengthy tow. None would last as well as those for whom the hammer struck its blows, struck its blows, struck its blows. For whom the hammer struck its blows. Right there, and Glenn sounded great too. Mark plays on our album, the one that's got the picture right here, you know, the
The picture right here that looks like LSD.
Yeah, that one.
Actually,
I like that green cover.
actually, I have to put this down for a second. And if I can turn it off. There we go.
Do you play sea shanties at all?
Do we?
Do you play sea shanties at all?
Just
Wasn't
one
that
we've
one?
heard.
Just that one I know.
Yeah.
It was lovely.
Thank you. I've tried to sell it a number of times. That song had about 6 or 7 versions. I tried every one on Pynton Dale, and I never heard from them.
Oh, you
So
did?
I don't know if they heard this latest version, which I think is a good one.
It's a good one.
Yeah, okay, throw that microphone this way.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. This is another one that I don't play harmonica on. I'll get to the harmonica once in a minute. Oh, God. Anyways, this is, that's my microphone, I don't want to step on that. Please go somewhere else. Don't step on that. Thank you. Anyway, this here, it's a song about one of my favorite subjects, paranoia. And by the way, this another peculiar instrument. I seem to specialize in them. I also have a bass trombone that I haven't been bringing down recently because basically brass winds are like weightlifting. If you don't do it every day, it turns to fat. And I'm pretty fat. I got pretty fat chops right now, so I have to spend about 3 months, doing lip ups to get my chops back together before I can play. Besides, if I did play bass trombone in here, it would probably bring down the walls. She's a big instrument, but this is a banjitar. That's the guitarron, this is a banjitar. These strange mutant combinatorial instruments, intersectional. This is basically, as the name implies, if you're, really paying attention, it's a 6-string banjo tuned like a guitar, so you play guitar in and it comes out Dixieland, or maybe old timey if you're lucky. I have, believe it or not, 12 banjo albums. I know where they're going to go. And where am I going to put them?
I don't know, but...
in my 900 square foot house with 1,100 square feet of stuff in it.
The other thing about that is that I even have one album that is entitled Banjo with Ping Pong Rhythm. I think you might really like that one.
Ping pong.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, it might be that they put it through a ping pong delay. Nah, that's too new.
It was old. These are old things. Now I have a bunch of Pete Seeger stuff that I'm not parting with, but
Just letting you know now that I may drop those off in your mailbox.
piled up around my mailbox, you mean?
Never was blessed with a clean mind, always had to sleep alone. Never was blessed with a woman, would run off on her own. Never had me no new car, the old ones all broke down. Met free love on the subway, she knocked me to the ground.
I remember that.
Never had us a clean war, we always sent bodies home. Oil washed up on the clean shore, the corporations never wrong. Never seemed like I trusted anything in sight. Sometimes I think I'm the president, wife said that's all right. Never had me a good dog, wouldn't bite me on the leg. Never had me a good job, didn't leave times to pay. Never had me no good friend, never ever let you down. Long as I got my sight on it, never get screwed up. Never had me a good meal, always wanted something more. Never had me a good shirt, the pockets always tore. Never had me no shelter, lay my weary head. I once slept on the park bench where the New York Times was printed. Never had me a full moon, mine was always half. Never told me a good joke could make somebody laugh. Never wrote me a good poem, drew me a decent line. I can dance with the railroad gang and drink their turpentine. Now I come to the moral of a strange and painful song. Think of this as a dead-end road, the GPS is wrong. The gas gauge says I'm empty, the compass says I'm alone. Hurricane took my property, Wall Street stole my soul. I think that's sort of beat poetry.
Just sort of sums it up.
I had to tame that song down a little bit. It had kind of a pretty funny line that the men would give, and I thought, well, I'm not singing this in front of any families. All right, what do we got? Oh, we got family history.
R-rated. PG, 13-year-old.
I haven't spent much time with my genealogy, except that 8 or 9 years ago, a shirt-tail relative who I've never met sent me a whole package of stuff. And it traced our ancestors from Northern Ireland in like 1740 to the present day, really. It kind of ends with my father and grandfather. My grandfather was a child in a family with 12 kids. That was pretty common then, you know, born in what, 1880 or something like that. And
12 kids,
so
6
the person,
died.
yeah, so the person I heard from is actually the great-grandson of my grandfather's brother. But my grandfather was the youngest, so there's a huge age range there. So anyway, I looked through that. It took me a while to figure it out. I did a bunch of research because we were Scottish. We are Scottish. So how did the Scottish get to Northern Ireland? Well, they were sent there by the English to displace the Irish Catholics. So the Irish Catholics then kind of moved into the hinterland, and the Scottish people who went there to displace them became, owners of the fields, and there was still some stratification, so they weren't exactly top of the line. Well, then for years England would shortchange those people by not allowing them to export things. So first they tried to export their wool, and then England said, no, we do that, you can't do that. So then they grew flax, and then England said, no, we have our own flax, you can't do that. So, but at some point, my ancestor left Ireland and died in Virginia in 1740, so I don't know exactly when. And then there's different moves. At some point they moved to Kentucky for just a short time. And just at the time the slavery, where the states divided up slavery, 1831, that family left there and they went to Orange County in Indiana, which was a haven for the Underground Railroad. And they were traveling with a family member they referred to as Daddy Frost. And I don't know if you get a feeling from who Daddy Frost might be, but my feeling is that they were Scottish Presbyterians, so they were certainly anti-slavery. But they moved from Kentucky to Indiana just at that time. And then later on, my great-grandfather then homesteaded in Iowa. Sailed away from Ireland, we were troubled by the war. The Catholics hated Protestants, I know well what for. They watched us farm on stolen ground, while they got hedge and rocks. And the king's men filled those fields with flax and robbed us at the docks. You beg to feed your family, none but taters do. And you cannot find a loaf of bread, grab a pint. The ship was priceless, and we not worth a damn. So we give 10 years of service for the promise of some land. Like my father's father's father, the father before him. Are we cursed to build our homes upon souls that might have been? And the green seas are so restless, rocky waves are cruel. The ocean never gave a care as we went passing. The voyage gave us agony, stuck down in that hole. The water tasted black, and there was slime upon the road. I've never been so sick at sea and dreaming of hard when someone yells Virginia, and we drop that anchor down. Oh, 10 years of tobacco, we were done with servitude. Then we took a stand on slavery, the laws of man exclude. We rode to Indiana, declaring ourselves free. And thanks to those old Quakers, they was thou and I was thee. Like my father's father's father, the father before him. Are we cursed to build our homes upon lives that might have been? And the green fields are so restless, the rocky slopes are cruel. The mountains never gave up fear as we went passing through. The settlers struck for Iowa in 1844. The French had sold a lot of it, I know well what for. We'd run off all the Indians, and some were just struck down. And once again we found ourselves farming stolen ground. Like my father's father's father, the father before him. Are we cursed to build our homes upon lives that might have been? And the green fields are so restless, the rocky slopes are cruel. The mountains never gave a damn as we went passing. It's hard to write a short song sometimes.
Well, when you're talking about history, you can go on as long as you like. I mean, it doesn't stop, but you have to. You're only to draw breath.
I think Antoine or Antoine. So my dad was a minister, and that meant that he performed many funerals and marriages and that sort of thing. But, and I don't know if you've ever been around a bunch of ministers, they're always telling things that happened in the baptismal or happened at the funeral or happened, you know.
Preacher jokes.
Yeah.
Preacher stories.
Stories about being at the funeral and somebody walks up to the casket and says, "That ain't Ma." things like that. So. But my dad told me, and I don't know how old I was, but I remember this, and I assumed it was a true story about a guy that froze to death in the woods and sitting against a tree, and they brought him to the funeral parlor and they put him in front of a fireplace and put some weights on his knees to try to get him to flatten out. And there was a night watchman, and this was my dad telling this story, saying, and in the middle of the night, the knees thawed out and the back didn't, and this body sat up, and the night watchman freaked and left. so anyway, so I used that story as a basis for the song.
Screamed like a frightened child.
Mark can join us whenever he gets up. chin was resting on his knees like he was resting nice. Arms around his legs, fingers white with frost. About a mile out on the tundra, old Antoine's life was lost. Anton, won't you read from the book? In your hands, won't you read and take away my pain? Pretend it's a book of the things you said. Won't you read those passages again? They tipped him from the snowbank. He was solid as a rock. His mustache broke right off him as they rolled into his back. Frozen in that position, knees stuck to his chin. They had bought the best of coffins, but they could not put him in. Anton, won't you read from the book? In your hands, won't you read and take away my pain? Pretend it's a book, the things you said. Won't you read those passages again? They built a great big bonfire to try to help him thaw. They put weights upon his knees, a sapling sprang upon his jaw. In the middle of his weight, the frozen knees gave way, and the sapling snapped his head up, and the whole town ran away. Anton, won't you read from the book? In your hands, won't you read and take away my pain? Pretend it's a book, the things you said. Won't you read those passages again? They never buried Antoine, 'cause he never did lie flat. I drug him to the place he died, and that is where he sat. Still upright in his coffin, so this is what I did. I put a good book in his hands, because I could not close the lid. Anton, won't you read from the book? In your hands, won't you read and take away my pain? Pretend it's a book, the things you said. Won't you read those passages again? When I think of Antoine, I can see him everywhere. The raven's got his eyeball, the porcupine his hair. The otter's got his attitude, the wolverine his look. There's a bear out on the tundra, still reading Antoine's book. Anton, won't you read from the book? In your hands, won't you read and take away my pain? Pretend it's a book, the things you said. Won't you read those passages again?
Well, this is where I get to play two instruments at the same time. No, I've got my microphone.
Oh, okay, whoops.
This one, I do have it. Watch out. Watch out. Point it the right way. Okay. Let's stay hold still. And
Mark's discovering that I play stuff differently every time.
oh no!
Whether I want to or not.
Arrangements are for sissies, which is kind of I get to play with baby Gramps every now and again. There it is. Baby, when you want to play with him, you've got to be constantly alert, because he's kind of like a flight of one of those flights of birds that you see, you know, the big, huge, you know, a murmuring of wrens, you know, there's sparrows and then they go this way, and then they go this way. That's what playing with Gramps is like. He's playing around, and he does something, and he does something, and you just sort of go, whoa, wait a minute. Hanging on for dear life. Saw him on Letterman with half of Bob Dylan's backup band. Those guys, again, they can play anything the first time, twice as fast. But even they were having trouble, you know. What's he doing now? You know, kind of thing. And they were, of course, way too cool to go, this guy's really hard. Oh, I'm playing a song on the banjo and the harmonica. And it's kind of like if a song is not a soul of an instrument, at least it's the soul expectation of the instrument. You hear a banjo of any kind that's being played with chords and stuff, and this is one of the songs that you'll think of, or that will think of you. You just I use this rig in parks, and it's going to fall apart. Excuse me, machinery. I don't need this. You decided you were going to go into that. Oh. There it is. This is also as good for wasting time, but it's all right. Time is what we have the most of, really, when you get right down to it. And even it's limited, darn it. Is there nothing? No, I miss one that I adore, more than I miss New Orleans.
That was wonderful. That's wonderful.
Isn't that pretty song? I think so too.
You can see why I asked Thaddeus to play with me, and he's been with me now since like 2011 or
Somewhere in there.
2010 or something.
Somewhere in the deep, dark,
So I'm at an open
depths
mic,
of
and
time.
I gotta find that. He was playing trombone that night, just nothing but trombone, bro. It was like,
One of
I
those
think this
nights.
guy's good. You
Yes,
know,
doing something weird. That's neat. I like that. Let's do that.
I don't know if I'll remember the news, but I was going to share with you that the guy who invented all those conspiracy theories was murdered on his front porch. Now, he thought he was in a secure location. He lived on the 12th floor of a 12-story building. The building was built and owned by a guy that owned a number of worldwide bookstores. And when they installed the elevator, they didn't go by the building code. They built it according to the Dewey Decimal System, which meant that you had to know where you were going if you got in that elevator.
Boy, I'll
Also,
say. Boy, howdy.
So anyway, this guy thought he was secure, but on the 12th floor, answered the door at some point. The whole thing was caught on video because, you know, a building like that had a lot of security. So it was caught on video, and the police looked through the video, and they discovered that his final words were, "Who's there? Who's there?" And so they hired a psychic, who also happened to be a librarian. And she determined that because of his final words, he was probably murdered in a fit of jealous rage by the guy who invented the knock-knock joke.
Well, that's a long way to go to get to it.
I know. So, well, they escaped in a rented Prius that was driven by Minnie Minerva. Now, she's the person who wrote all those minister, priest, and a guy going to a bar, you know, those. But she's sort of been unemployed during the pandemic because those jokes
Nobody goes
require
to
you
a bar.
socialize. Yeah, they don't go in a bar. So she
Preach
was
the bar
driving
so
Uber and
crap,
driving.
a carrot walk into a bar and the bartender says, "What is this, a joke?"
Yes. So anyway,
The
Minnie
horse
drove
goes
him.
into the bar and the guy
Yeah.
says, "Hey, what's with the long face?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she wrote.
Man
all
walks
those.
into a bar and says, "Ow!"
So Minnie Minerva wrote all those jokes, but she was unemployed and driving this getaway car.
Yeah.
So they made it about 40 miles from the scene of the murder.
Oh my God, there's more.
And they were in some little town, and they inexplicably, well, I can't explain why, they stopped at a crosswalk to let a chicken cross the road. Well, the chicken went out to the middle of the road and stood there for 15 seconds, turned around and went back to the curb where it came. So it absolutely ruined the data. You know, the chicken attempted to cross the road but did not complete the attempt, so therefore, it's gone, you know. So, and furthermore, if they had interviewed the chicken at that time, the chicken could not have told them why he attempted to cross the road. And you might think he was an elderly chicken. Hard to know what his brain power was at that point. You might think that the chicken couldn't say why he crossed the road because of his elderly state or IQ, I don't know, but you'd be wrong because he couldn't say it because chickens cannot talk. So anyway, while they were watching this data explosion appear in front of them, the police caught up with them. And of course,
they're doing that, police came.
policeman went to the driver's side and knocked on the window. and just jokingly said, "Knock, knock," and it freaked him out. You know, Minnie and the guy that invented the guy that murdered the guy that invented conspiracy theories. So they shot their hands up and dented the roof of the Prius. But the policeman said, "Don't worry, I just stopped you because you have a taillight out. So Minnie got sort of a little nervous about it, and she thought, well, she'd try her feminine wiles, and she said, well, officer, I think I might have a spare bulb in the glove compartment. Would you be so kind to help me? And the officer said, ma'am, do you know how many policemen it takes to change a light bulb? And then I woke up. And I said to myself, I'm never listening to NPR again.
How many policemen does it take to turn in the light bulb? Heck, they'll turn in the whole lamp.
Can't believe I remembered that. Charlie was a good boy, good intention. Charlie was a good boy, good intentions. No one really wanted Charlie. They had to pay to get him into school. Rushed him off to camp in the summer. Promptly sent him home for breaking rules. You know, the mother said he takes after the father, but the father said he looks like you. Finally they agreed. He's in the wrong lane on life's highway, and he's not to be trusted again. He's crossed over, oh God, poor fellow, double yellow, and he's probably gonna lose it all. Charlie shot the shoes off his brother, and the police took him right to jail. No one dared to go and see him or bother with his bail. You know, the judge did not spell mercy, much less pronounce clemency, and the jury was agreed. He's in the wrong lane on life's highway, and he's not to be trusted again. He's crossed over, oh God, poor fellow, devil yellow, and he's probably gonna lose it all. Charlie was a good boy, good intention. Charlie was a good boy, good intentions. Charlie was a goner when I met him. I think I thought that he was dead. I think I thought he had a screw somewhere up inside his head. But the thing that knocked me over, yeah, really got my goat, was the way I heard him say, I'm in the wrong lane on life's highway, and I'm not to be trusted again. I've crossed over, oh God, poor fellow, double yellow, and I'm probably gonna lose it all. And he said, why try, I won't make it till the day I die. I'm in the wrong lane on life's highway. I'm in the wrong lane on life's highway. You got one?
Sure, I'll be big fish.
All right.
Another one I can do with the band guitar. Yeah, all the rest of
I wrote that song in driving around Washington D.C. in the passenger middle of a Love pickup truck with two guys that I worked for. They were plasterers, and I was the gopher guy that would haul in the bags of cement and things like that.
I think hod carrier might be.
Hod, yeah, right.
You're carrying a hod.
And we got stuck at one of those go-rounds, and my boss was kind of swearing at the car in front of us, said, that guy's in the wrong lane of life's highway. And
Songwriters
so
frequently will
then
say, you know, I think that's a song.
Pretty soon I had a song and got home and wrote it down. Well, these guys, my boss and his partner, thought they owned that song after that, so they would come to my shows and demand to be introduced, you know, whenever I sang it. So.
Sure, Johnny. Up just slightly, so that you can actually, I said, so that you can actually. So that you can actually hear me, yes. We're here, there it is. Surprisingly loud lunchbox amplifier. So one of the things that happens when you play on the street with amplification is that you are constantly going through equipment trying to find the lightest and smallest thing that will actually sound any good, you know. And up until the last few years, you were forced to either improvise from, you know, like automobile amplifiers attached to big speakers with like a 12-volt motorcycle battery that you carried around to make them work, or you were able to get a hold of things that were pretty inadequate of various sorts. But nowadays, I guess busking has become big business or something, because you can get all kinds of amazing doodads for playing on the street corner. Yeah. But this is not the harmonica I need for this one. Harmonica I need for this one is over there. Can I do two?
Yes.
We're close to the end of the night, but
Yeah.
if I could do two, that would be nice.
That'd be great.
Because I have. Yeah, that's way louder. That's pretty much Jackson Square level there, Pioneer Square. And this is about. I wrote this during the He Who Shall Not Be Named administration, and it kind of shows. But he's a big fish in a small pond, barely room to swim. But if you want to go somewhere, you gotta go through him. He's a big dog in a small yard. He don't need to run. I just wait by the gate till you come. But he's 800-pound gorilla. He's trouble on a go-go stick. Like a blackberry vine or a porcupine. He's got one good trick. Yeah, he's a fat cat on the soft chair. Got a velvet paw. But if you try to make a move, you'll get the two-feather claw. To the claw. Stuck out, yeah, he's a big fish on a small pond. He's got a mighty thirst, but if you want it to get better, you better get him first. I mean it when I say, if you want it to get better, you better get him first. Thank you so much. But now, one of the things you might never expect to see in an act in this price range is the Steely Dan cover. But I go, yes, this is wonderful because this song actually translates into banjo. And It's even about New Orleans. So what can I say? By the waters down in New Orleans, my baby is a girl of the quarter. She's a beauty like you've never seen. Where the sailors' fancies harder to pay. Red beans and rice for a quarter. You can see her almost any day. Singing doodle-doodle-day. And if you hear my please tell her that I said hello. Please make it clear when her baby's done, she's got a place to go. I walked alone down to Miracle Mile. I met my love by the shrine of Mars. She won my heart with a Cajun smile, singing doodle-doodle-doo. She was the $1,000,000 words I'd say. She loved the candy and flowers that I brought her. She said she loved me, she was on her way, singing doodle-doodle-doo. And if you hear my please, tell her that I love her so. Please make it clear when her day is done, she's got a place to go. That's called Pearl of the Quarter. It's, I think, on their second album, Countdown to Ecstasy, 1974 or something like that.
Do you need a break, or should I just tell a story?
I need to take these things off, but apart from that, you've got a couple more songs there. We're almost done, you know.
I know.
Look at the time.
I've left out Sicily.
Go ahead. Let me unstrap my servo bits here real quick.
So, you know, people are always curious about my history. My wife is here with me tonight, and when I met my wife, she had a really smart dog. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where you put together a melded family, a woman and a dog, and, that sort of thing. But the dog was really smart, and this dog could, you know how dogs can kind of be trained to say things. So this dog could sit down in front of her, look up at her, and say things like, "I love you," or "I love you," however you hear it. So, and well, don't get me wrong. The dog would say things to me too. To me, the dog would say things like, "Go get the paper," and things like that. And so this went on for like maybe a year or something like that. I was sort of second fiddle in my own house, and but one day my wife sort of let on that she had been writing things down for this dog. And I thought, well, man, that dog is not as smart as I thought he was. He's been reading this stuff. So I looked in his bed, and sure enough, he had a stack of 3x5 cards. And this was very embarrassing for me to admit that after all these years, that I put up with that. But after about 17 years, that dog lived a long time, 17 years. Dog finally passed away, and I had the courage to finally talk to my wife and said, I'm never playing second fiddle to a smart dog again. And that's when she got the horse, Mr. Ed. Now, it's not as bad as you think. I mean, okay, Mr. Ed could talk, but it's not like he could read.
Can you depict tomatoes?
Yeah.
It's about one more song's worth, and I think it would be a nice one to stop.
All right. Back in the 70s, I had a bus trip, coast to coast. You paid $30 to Greyhound or Trailways, whoever, and you had what was called a Maripass, and you could go anywhere in those 30 days. What they don't tell you is you see all the scenic things in the middle of the night. So I took some long bus trips, and I was reading a book by Joyce Carol Oates called Garden of Earthly Delights. It's about a migrant farmer. And made a big impression on me, so I wrote this song. It's been with me a long time. But, when Yvonne and I were doing some research on the book, because I thought, well, I'd have to read that again. She wrote it, I think, in the 60s. And lo and behold, she rewrote it entirely in like 2009. You think, why does a novelist go back and rewrite a novel? And she explained that she couldn't say many of the things that she would have said then. You know, the language and the censorship and those kinds of things. So it had, you know, the later version is a lot more raw language and stuff like that. So this retains some of the early novel, but anyway. So that's the story of this one. We're gonna pick tomatoes, let the sun get high. When the sun gets low, no sense staring at the floor. Just pretend you got a load of laundry in the other room. You need a horse, just fly around on a broom. We're on the road, the story goes, just like rainwater falling on the countryside. I'll be your sweet water, darling, when the world runs dry. We're gonna ride into Jersey, sleep on the bus all night. I like to lay here thinking that I got my little farm inside. Just pretend you figured out a way to build a little fire. If fire gets low at your gut one, build it higher. We're on the road, the story goes, just like rainwater falling on the countryside. I'll be your sweet water, darling, when the world runs dry. Well, I save my money, gonna go to town, buy me a little brew. I gotta blur my vision, make the women here look just like you. Oh, no man's gonna make me feel like I ain't a king. Taking my time, looking for the very right thing. We're on the road, the story goes just like rainwater falling on the countryside. I'll be your sweet water, darling, when the world runs dry. I'm gonna wrap these kids up in this camel hair coat of mine. I'm gonna sing some songs, make a coyote walk the line. I got a gold tooth somewhere down inside my mouth. Buy me a rocking chair when that old tooth falls out. We're on the road, the story goes just like rainwater on the countryside. I'll be your sweet water, darling, when the world runs dry. Now when the sun is beating down, no good water can be found if I'm the last one around, like rainwater falling on the ground. I'll be your sweet water, I'll be your sweet water, I'll be your sweet water when the world runs dry. I think we should do Annie as well. Okay, so I know it's boring when folk singers tell you the history of every song. But at least I'm not introducing the song's relatives. You know,
Yeah, there you
that
go.
really gets boring.
And Cleve, here's the songs on. Give her a big round of applause.
So this is a true story. I'll try to cut it short, but I worked for 2 nightclubs in Washington, D.C., mostly for the Child Herald, which was a blues club at DuPont Circle. And my job was I would get a phone call from my boss who was on the road with her charge that she managed on the road, a musician, blues musician, Chris Smither actually. And she would call me and say, call John Hammond and tell him we'll pay him $500. And so I had this nice role of just calling these people like I had the money and was important and said, we can pay you this. And
The man with the money.
Yeah.
That's a good job.
so, anyway.
Even if it's not yours.
But one of my jobs was also to pick up people at the airport, and so I picked up a lot of people at the airport. And one day I picked up Odetta. I took her to her hotel, and this is in '77, so it was before Uber. And so I got her bags into the hotel, and Odetta said, well, you know, she didn't want to call a cab. She said, would you be my driver for a couple days? She had a TV show in the morning, so I went and picked her up early in the morning, took her to the TV show, changed strings on her guitar, and but on this TV show was Rip Taylor, the comedian, very wild comedian. He just absolutely took over the show, and she barely got a chance to sing, but she did sing some songs. But he invited her to come to the cellar door that night. So of course I'm her driver, so I went to the cellar door and we saw Rip Taylor. Well, sitting up there, she was telling me about her early history, and she had met a comedian she referred to as a jazz comic. His name was Lord Buckley. Now, I had never heard of Lord Buckley, and it was many, many years later.
You not so hip, are you, boy?
Yeah, that's right. I had never heard of Lord Buckley or what a jazz comic was, so I had this immediate image of this guy that told jokes while playing jazz, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool, you know. So anyway, I'll just. There's a lot more to the story, but that's a source. This was my first song where I wrote something thinking, okay, here's what a jazz comic does. Penny was a waitress at the disco, one of the prettiest little waitresses you ever did want to see. Every night she'd park her car in the lot near the disco. The parking lot attendant stared at her knees. Penny, I wish you'd see more than a parking lot attendant in me. And I could go pretty far if you trust me with more than your car. Annie was blonde, she had steel gray blue eyes, and in the words of the parking lot attendant, Annie drives a really nice car. He had to listen to the other guys as they came out of the parking lot with their dry martinis, their Lamborghinis, and Arnold really never had a chance. But one day, Annie came into his parking lot and he got the courage from somewhere to tell her a dollar. When Arnold grew up, he became a blues singer.
What else?
And he's not off from the disco, and he doesn't answer her phone. Arnold sits alone down by the parking lot, wishing to heaven he could holler at home. And he ain't no fun parking these cars all alone. Annie, I could go pretty far if you trust me with more than your car. Years later, Arnold was singing in the little blues club. He looked down the front row, there was a woman looked just like Annie. So after the show, he went up to her and he said, you know, I'm Arnold, I think I used to be your parking lot attendant. And it was Annie. She gave him a dollar. Kinda gets you, don't it? And I could go pretty far if you trust me with more than your car. And I think that's gonna do it. Hey, Mark Filler's gonna be your what Saturday?
Oh, next Friday.
Next Friday with Jump Ensemble.
Right, yeah,
Right.
5-piece jazz group.
Mark is on our album. He's our percussionist, and we're going to get him to sing one of these days. I don't know if he can do that. Thank you all for coming out.
Yes, thank you so much. It's lovely to have an audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely to be an audience.
Oh, good.
Come back.
Yeah, this live music thing is pretty neat. I'm surprised they don't do it more often. Oh, wait.
Oh yeah. I've already sped up all the way through
Well, of course you
that. Of course,
did. You were getting nervous?
but it was fun. It worked out.
As long as you all do it together.
And I thought,
My father's family was similar with
oh yeah.
taking the same path. Scotland, Ireland, Kentucky, Iowa.
Amazing.
Do you know anywhere in Iowa?
Yes.
Sorry.